Tell me everything that happened.
Bryan Stevenson is a young Harvard-educated lawyer. He travels to Alabama to fight for prisoners on death row.
But what you're doing is going to make a lot of people upset.
He teams up with a woman named Ava Onsley, and together they built a law firm to help death row inmates.
I was in before you even offered me the job.
Their first client, Walter McMillian, is a black man wrongfully convicted of murdering a white woman, despite overwhelming evidence of his innocence.
Your life is still meaningful, and I'm gonna do everything possible to keep them from taking it.
Bryan is determined to uncover the truth and battle systemic racism, corrupt officials, and a biased legal system.
I can't believe you talked to all my people and said you're gonna fight for me.
I did.
That mean a lot.
Through relentless investigation, Bryan exposes the lies that put Walter behind bars.
When people care about a thing that much, they'll do anything to get what they want.
But the court rejects his appeal despite the overwhelming evidence he provided.
Therefore, that the trial testimony of Ralph Myers is not found to have been perjured testimony.
Will he succeed or will he fail? Stick around to find out what happens next.
We all need grace. We all need mercy.
The story starts in Monroe County, Alabama. A black man named Walter McMillian, who is also called Johnny V, runs a small business selling pulpwood. One day after work, without warning, the police arrest him. He is accused of killing a white girl named Rhonda Morrison. She worked at a dry cleaning store in the town. Even though there is no strong proof or reason to connect Walter to the crime, the authorities blame him. He is quickly taken to jail, put on trial, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Even before his trial, Walter is held on death row, the part of prison where people wait to be executed. His situation is very unfair and scary. The system seems to be working against him simply because of his skin color and where he lives. The scene then shifts to a young man named Bryan Stevenson. He is a smart and hopeful law student at Harvard University. Bryan travels to a jail in Jackson, Georgia, as part of his internship. There he meets a death row prisoner named Henry Davis. Henry is nervous and scared during the meeting, but Bryan talks to him kindly and calmly. Bryan tells Henry that he is visiting on behalf of the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, the organization where he is working as an intern. He explains that a lawyer will soon take on Henry's case and that he does not need to worry about being executed within the next year. Henry feels a huge sense of relief after hearing this. His body relaxes and the fear in his eyes starts to disappear. The two men begin to talk more openly, sharing memories from their childhoods and the paths that led them to this moment. But the warm and peaceful moment ends suddenly. A rude and aggressive prison guard enters the room. Without showing any care or respect, he grabs Henry and drags him. Moments like this shake you. They shouldn't feel normal, but they often are. Bryan watches, shocked and heartbroken by the cruel way Henry is treated. 2 years later, Bryan finishes law school at Harvard. He has several great job offers with big salaries, but he chooses a very different path. Instead of chasing money, he moves to Alabama, one of the states with the most death row prisoners. Most people would run the other way. Bryan wants to help people who were wrongly convicted or cannot afford a good lawyer. He dreams of bringing justice to those who have been forgotten or ignored by the system. Once he arrives in Alabama, Bryan meets with Ava Onsley, a determined woman who is to work alongside him. Ava has always wanted to start a legal center to help people on death row. The two of them decide to team up and create the Equal Justice Initiative, an organization focused on defending the wrongly accused and fighting against unfair sentences. However, their mission faces trouble from the beginning. A white landlord who had agreed to rent them office space suddenly changes his mind after learning they will be helping death row inmates. He says he doesn't want to be involved with their work. This setback is disappointing, but Eva refuses to give up. She lets Bryan work out of her home for the time being. True allies don't wait for comfort. They show up where it counts. While they are working together at her house, Eva shares her personal reason for doing this kind of work. She remembers reading about a man on death row who couldn't get any legal help. His story haunted her. That memory pushed her to keep searching for someone who would help fight for justice. Just when she was about to give up, she got a phone call from Bryan. He offered legal support and even had federal funding to help start their project. Soon after, Bryan visits a local prison to meet 6 men on death row. But even before entering, he faces discrimination. Bryan is shocked and explains that lawyers should not be treated this way. Still, the guard refuses to let him in unless he agrees. With no other option, Bryan gives in. Even lawyers fighting for justice aren't spared from humiliation. The system knows no shame. Inside, he listens carefully as the prisoners share their stories. One of them is Herbert Richardson, a Vietnam War veteran. Herbert talks about coming back from the war with serious mental health issues, especially post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. How many others like Herbert are punished for wounds no one bothered to treat? He says that he placed a bomb on a woman's porch but never meant to kill anyone. But I didn't mean to kill nobody. Last lawyer said there ain't nothing left to do. Whatever you did, your life is still meaningful. His actions came from a troubled mind and untreated pain. Later, Bryan finally meets Walter McMillian. Johnny D. At this point, Walter feels broken and hopeless. He no longer believes the legal system can help him. He tells Bryan that every lawyer before him walked away once the money was gone. Walter doesn't expect anything different this time. He warns Bryan that taking on his case is dangerous. This warning is in paranoia. It's experience talking. He says the system is brutal, especially toward black men who stand up against it. According to Walter, once Bryan starts digging into the truth, the authorities will destroy him, just like they did with others before him. Walter also shares his anger about being judged guilty without proper evidence. There are no fingerprints, no real proof, only the lies of one man trying to cut a deal with the police. After that, Walter is too upset to keep talking. He walks away. Back at Eva's house, Bryan starts going through the files of the inmates he met. The next morning, he tells Eva that he believes Walter is completely innocent. The main witness who accused him is Ralph Myers, a man who has spent much of his life going in and out of jail. Ralph has also been convicted in another murder case. Bryan also discovered another witness named Bill Hooks. Bill claimed that he saw Walter's truck near the crime scene, but something about his testimony doesn't feel right. Bryan and Eva begin to think that Ralph Myers went to the police, who were under a lot of pressure to solve the murder, and gave them a name in exchange for a lighter sentence. Bryan decides to meet with Tommy Chapman, the district attorney of Monroe County. Tommy used to be a public defender, so Bryan hopes he might be open to reason. During their meeting, Bryan carefully explains why he thinks Walter's conviction is wrong, but Chapman brushes off Bryan's concerns. You know, I wasn't part of his prosecution, right? That was way before my time. Take a look at the sections I've highlighted here. You'll see some problems with Ralph Myers' testimony. He says that Walter brought pain to the town and warns that reopening the case will upset many people. Bryan replied calmly, saying that his job is not to keep people comfortable. It's to make sure the truth comes out and justice is done. Truth rarely brings comfort. It brings change, and not everyone wants that. Well, it isn't my job to make people happy, to achieve justice for my client. As Bryan leaves the office, he sees 3 black men being handcuffed and arrested right there on the street. The constant injustice around him only strengthens his determination to keep fighting. Later, Bryan visits Walter's home and meets with his wife, Minnie, along with other family members. This is our youngest son, John, my baby girl, Jackie. Inside, they all say the same thing. Walter could not have committed the crime. On the day of the murder, Walter was at home, hosting a fish fry to raise money for their church. He spent the whole day with his family, including working on his truck with his son John. During the visit, a family member reveals another important detail. In the past, Walter had an affair with a white woman. When her husband found out, he told the whole community. After that, people started gossiping. First, they called Walter a cheater. Then, they accused him of being a drug dealer. Eventually, these rumors turned into something even worse. People started saying he was a murderer. So by the time somebody called him a murderer, ain't nobody thought twice about it. Even though Minnie was hurt by his cheating, she says that Walter is still the father of her children, and she supports him no matter what. Before leaving, Bryan speaks with Darnell Houston, a friend of Walter's son. Darnell says that Bill Hook's testimony is completely false. On the morning of the murder, Bill was actually with Darnell fixing a car engine. They were working on a head gasket together, but both of them had been arrested for burglary. Then, after Bill gave his false statement, the police dropped the charges against him. At first, Darnell is scared to speak out. He worries that helping Bryan might get him into trouble. But after thinking it over, he agrees to help. He signs a statement confirming that Bill lied in court. This new piece of evidence gives Bryan his first strong chance to fight for a new trial and possibly free Walter from death row. Finally, a crack in the wall. The next day, Bryan goes to visit Johnny D again. To his surprise, Johnny already knows that Bryan went to meet his family recently. Johnny is very touched by Bryan's efforts. He can see that Bryan is truly serious about helping him. Johnny feels emotional and impressed by how much Bryan is doing. But at the same time, he's a bit confused. He wonders why a man who went to a famous school like Harvard would choose to spend his life helping prisoners who are on death row. In response, Bryan opens up and shares a personal and painful memory from his past. Many years ago, his grandfather was murdered over something small, a black and white television. After this horrible event, no one came forward to help his family. Bryan realized then that people outside his community didn't care about what happened to them. Bryan admits to Johnny that he understands what it feels like to live in the shadows, to be unseen and unheard. That experience made him feel invisible, as if their lives didn't matter to the rest of the world. That's exactly why he is fighting. For justice, and for people like Johnny who have been forgotten. Johnny listens closely. Bryan's words truly touch him. Because of this honest and heartfelt talk, Johnny finally agrees to let Bryan reopen his case file. Soon after this conversation, something very serious happens. The state announces an execution date for Herbert, another man on death row. While Bryan and Eva are talking about Herbert's situation, Eva suddenly gets a terrifying phone call. Someone threatens her, warning that her house will be blown up if she doesn't stop helping Johnny D. It's a frightening moment. But even though her life is in danger, Eva refuses to stop. She is strong and determined. She knows this work is important, and even if the road is full of danger, she won't give up. Bryan and Eva keep working together. The first thing they decide to do is find someone in the town who knows the truth about what happened and is brave enough to speak up. But this turns out to be very difficult. Most people are too scared. The family of the murdered girl is very powerful, and nobody wants to go against them. If you are not working for that poor girl's family, then I ain't got nothing to say to you. I'm a lawyer representing Johnny D. McMillian. Still, their effort brings one small success. A former police officer finally agrees to meet Bryan. He lets him into his house and talks to him. This gives Bryan and Eva hope. They feel encouraged by this small victory. Small steps can still shake the ground when they move in the right direction, so they decide to take a big step forward. They rent a small building and give their organization an official name, the Equal Justice Initiative. This name shows their deep and long-term commitment to fighting for fairness and justice for everyone. Meanwhile, something else happens that brings trouble. The police arrest Arnold where he is working his regular job. They even did it right in front of his boss, which embarrassed and shocked him. Arnold becomes angry. He thinks that Bryan is the reason he is in trouble and immediately pulls out of Johnny's case. Before leaving, he tells Bryan to give Johnny D an apology from him. Bryan is frustrated and upset about this situation, feels unfair and makes things harder. Bryan then goes to meet Sheriff Tate. I need to speak with you. When he arrives at the sheriff's office, he finds the district attorney sitting there too. The two men are laughing and joking around. It's clear that they are close and working together. Bryan realizes that they have likely been teaming up to block his progress and stop him from helping Johnny D. During the meeting, the district attorney gives Bryan more bad news. He says that Bryan's motion to reopen Johnny's case has been officially denied. Bryan feels crushed. He is angry and disappointed. He walks out of the office full of emotions. But even with this huge setback, he doesn't give up. He goes back to the prison and talks with Johnny D. Together, they agree to try something new. They decide that Bryan will speak directly with Ralph Myers, the man whose testimony helped put Johnny on death row. Bryan meets Myers in the prison cafeteria. First, Myers doesn't want to talk. He avoids the subject of Johnny D completely, but Bryan doesn't give up. He keeps asking and slowly Myers starts to open up. He tells Bryan that the police questioned him about the girl's murder on the very same day he was arrested. Bryan finds this detail important. It makes him think that the police were more focused on finding someone to blame than on discovering the real killer. He says that when people become obsessed with solving a crime, they may do anything to get the outcome they want, even if it's the wrong one. After saying this, Myers gets up and walks away, leaving Bryan with a lot to think about. Soon, Bryan starts noticing a problem with the timeline. Myers was questioned on June RD, but the statement used in court came almost 2 months later. Something doesn't seem right. Bryan and Eva begin to believe that the police are hiding the original statement Myers gave. Bryan decides to investigate. He goes to the Escambia County Courthouse and starts digging through old case files. After hours of searching, he finally finds what he's looking for: a tape recording. In this recording, Myers tells Sheriff Tate that he knows nothing about Rhonda Morrison's murder. Even more shocking, Myers refuses to make a false statement against anyone. Eva is shocked when she hears this. This recording proves what Johnny has been saying all along. While they are still processing this important discovery, the day of Herbert's execution arrives. It's a heavy and emotional moment. Even though it's heartbreaking, Johnny encourages Bryan to stay calm and hopeful. Remember what we practice now, what we do. He believes in Bryan's mission and tells him to keep fighting until the very end. The next morning, Bryan receives a phone call. The court has denied his request to delay Herbert's execution. Sadly, Herbert is killed in the electric chair, just as the jury ordered. The loss is very painful and Bryan feels broken inside, but he knows he must keep going. He decides to continue fighting for other innocent people who are still on death row. Later on, something even more shocking comes out. While talking with Bryan, Myers confesses something serious. He says that he was threatened with the death penalty and tortured until he agreed to lie in court. Bryan asks him to tell the truth at the next trial. At first, Myers is nervous and confused, but it seems Bryan convinced him this is the last chance he could correct his wrong actions. On the day of the trial, Myers couldn't hold it in anymore. He breaks down and admits that he had lied. He says clearly that Johnny D had nothing to do with the murder. Now Bryan's case becomes stronger. Shortly, Myers' doctor testifies in court, explaining that Myers suffered mental problems after getting an electric shock from the state. Then the same former police officer who had helped Bryan earlier comes forward again. He testifies that the girl's body was found face down, not face up like Myers had claimed. He also says he was fired from his job because he refused to lie in court. However, even with all this new information, another month goes by without justice being served, and the court still refuses to give Johnny a new trial. They say that the evidence isn't strong enough to prove that Myers lied. So Johnny is sent back to Holman Correctional Facility, where he remains on death row. Walter McMillian shall be returned to Holman Correctional Facility, where he is to face death by electrocution. O'Brien also feels deeply disturbed. He starts to worry that all his work may have made things worse for Johnny and his family. But then during a prison visit, Johnny surprises him. He thanks Bryan from the bottom of his heart. He says that for the first time, someone is fighting for the truth. That alone means everything to him and his loved ones. Hope is a lifeline. For the first time, Johnny isn't just a prisoner. He's a man someone believes in. Shortly after their meeting, Bryan begins working on a new plan. This time, he prepares to send all the evidence to the Alabama Supreme Court in Montgomery. This higher court has more power and can force the lower court to give Johnny a new trial. Bryan also appears on a minute public TV segment. His name is Walter McMillian. Known to his friends as Johnny D, Johnny D says they want to execute the wrong man. He uses this chance to talk about Johnny's case and raise public awareness. Thanks to these efforts, the Alabama Supreme Court finally makes a big decision. They overturn the lower court's ruling and grant Johnny D a new trial. But Tommy Chapman, the district attorney, tries to slow down the process. Soon after, Bryan goes to visit Chapman at his house and asks him to support the motion. Chapman gets angry and throws Bryan out. Still, on the day of the court hearing, something unexpected happens. Bryan presents a strong argument. His speech in front of the judge is powerful. Then, in a surprising move, Chapman changes his mind. He decides to support the motion. Mr. Chapman, what is the state's position on this motion? And the state does not object to the motion, Your Honor. As a result, the case was dropped. Johnny D is finally free. All charges against you are dismissed, Mr. McMillian. He walks out of prison and reunites with his family after spending many years locked up for a crime he didn't commit. It says that Bryan Stevenson and his team of lawyers have helped death row inmates. One case became a crusade. Bryan's work proves justice delayed isn't justice denied if you never stop fighting. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.